My name is Mary Ellen Barrett, and I want to thank you for including me in Catholic Homeschool Week. It's a pleasure to be here. I think these kinds of things are really important for us to connect and encourage and inspire each other. So I'm really, really grateful that I've been included in this wonderful thing, this wonderful week. So today I'm here to talk to you about homeschooling and socialization. I think the title of the talk is "Oops, I Forgot to Socialize the Kids," which is pretty funny. One of the first things, and this is still kind of crazy to me, but one of the first things people will ask you when you're thinking about homeschooling or you tell them you've been homeschooling is, what about socialization? And now that homeschooling is really mainstream, you would think that that would be something that wouldn't come up, but it comes up, and it comes up all the time. So here I am to tell you that not only is socialization not really a problem when you're homeschooling, it's not something you have to set out specifically to do to make sure they're socialized, but it's actually the right reason to homeschool socialization. Academics, of course, are incredibly important in individualizing your curriculum for your children's needs, all of that stuff, really, really important. But the main reason that you want to homeschool your children is socialization. And that's going to floor a lot of people, but it's absolutely true. It is the reason that I started homeschooling. I know, right? Back in the million years ago. I started in, I think it was 2000, well, kind of half started in 2000 and really got going full on, everybody home 2001. So it was a long time ago. And it wasn't as common as it was then. And everybody talked about socialization. My kids were going to be weird. My kids weren't going to fit in. Da, 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 da. None of that happened. They're weird, but not for reasons that you would think. It's not socialization at all. That had nothing to do with it. And they're pretty well socialized and they get along pretty fine with everybody. So let's talk about what people say to you when you first tell them you're going to homeschool. Three questions always come up, and it was 20 years ago and it comes up now. First one is, are you crazy? Yes, I am, but not because I homeschool. I was born that way. It's a lot of work. People are much more interested in sending their kids to school because they have jobs and they have things they want to do, and they think that their kids will drive them crazy if they're home all day. My kids do drive me crazy, but that's okay because we're going crazy together. It is a lot of work. It's an actual job that you do, but it's a wonderful job. It's the best job you'll ever have. I'm kind of looking at the end of it now. I only have 4 more years. My youngest starts high school in September, so I'm really sad about that in a lot of ways. So yes, we're a little crazy for taking this on, but it's crazy in the good way, crazy in the crazy, exciting, fun, you can't believe how good this is going to be way. The other question is, how are you going to teach math and science? And you are going to, like when I started, there weren't nearly as many resources as there are now with online classes that didn't exist, dual enrollment, all of these things. And when you're first starting out, when you have your kindergarten or your first grader or your second grader, first of all, you can all do that math. Second of all, don't worry about high school, because by the time your little ones get to be in high school, there's going to be even more ways, and homeschooling is going to be even more mainstream if the public schools keep going the way they are. So do not concern yourself with math and science or any of those other subjects that you don't feel competent to teach, because there are resources available to you. If nothing else, there's lesson plans and teacher manuals. You know, if you use a curriculum like Seton, which is where I work, you get all of that daily information right there. A lot of the curriculum companies provide for that. So you don't have to worry about that kind of thing. And the last question everybody asks you is, what about socialization? How are they going to get to know about mainstream things? How are they going to get along with other kids? All those kinds of questions. For guys who are starting now, you guys, it's a lot easier because homeschooling is a lot more mainstream. So you'll find homeschoolers in various places. Your parish might have a group, the library might have a group, there might be a secular group near you, things like that. But it's still a little bit weird to some people, even post-COVID. So what they're concerned about is that your child be able to talk to other children, be able to have friends. Now, I talk a lot on my podcast with Ginny Sufrit about homeschooling being a much more authentic way to educate your children because they're having all these kinds of experiences. They're able to go to museums. They're able to go out in the world and do things. They take classes. They go to reenactments. They do where they're surrounded by all kinds of different people. There's a lot of freedom, and it's a lot more authentic of an education. So they're being socialized when they do that kind of a thing. Secondly, homeschool groups, which are popping up all over the place, tend to put children together in a way that, again, is more authentic. They tend to pair off and be friends with people who share their interests rather than a specific geographic location and age group, which is what schools do. You know, you live within these parameters and you were born before December 1st or February 1st, whatever your deadline is in your district. And these are going to be your friends for the next 12 years. Well, in homeschooling circles, you know, the two kids who like Legos might be 8 and 10, which in a school setting, they're not going to be friends. They might meet on the playground or, you know, at some event, but they're not going to be buddies. But in a homeschool setting, they're going to bond over this Lego thing and they're going to be great friends. The same thing with, you know, the girls who get together over their American Girl dolls, but there's other girls who just would prefer to play soccer. So they're going to kind of bond due to their interests and not necessarily, you know, geographic and other social, manufactured social situations. So it's a much more authentic way to provide socialization than that institutional kind of socialization that people are familiar with and think is the only way to go. We all grew up with that, and that's what we think is normal, but it's only in the last, I want to say 100, 120 years that was the public school systems were actually a thing. So it is very artificial in terms of socializing children. Now, there are a lot of concerns people have about that come under this heading of socialization. And you're going to hear them from, you know, the grandparents and the aunts and the uncles and all those people who still think this is really wacky. So if you homeschool your children, they are going to miss out on a lot of stuff. They're going to be sheltered, right? They're going to be sheltered. They're not going to know anything about the real world. Yes, we are going to shelter them until they are ready to deal with the real world. The real world right now is kind of horrifying. I mean, it's June. You can't leave the house without being attacked by aspects of the real world that maybe you don't want to discuss with your 5-year-old just yet. Things like that. So yes, they will be sheltered. But let me just tell you, having raised 8 children, I'm on the, you know, like I said, I'm on the tail end of this. The real world gets in. The real world finds you, and you are going to have discussions with kids even before you think you will. Even if you're really, really sheltering them, the real world leaks its way in. They're going to be familiar with movies and videos and all kinds of things that, you know, maybe you would have protected them from. But you are going to have a lot more control over that stuff than you would if they were out in the real world. When my children were very young, my daughter Katie, she went up until 1st grade at our local Catholic school. My son Ryan went till 3rd grade, and then I pulled everybody home. So in 1st grade, there was a show on Disney. It was called Cheetah Girls. I didn't want her to watch it. Now, it is incredibly mild compared to what's on the Disney Channel now. But at the time, I just didn't want it in my house. I thought it was junk and garbage, and I didn't like the way people talked on it. So Katie wasn't allowed to watch it. But she went to school with a bunch of kids who were allowed to watch it. And that's another thing about school, is that you are subjecting your children to other people's parenting. And maybe sometimes it's bad parenting, or if it's just different parenting than you have. So she would go to school with these kids and she would know everything about every episode and all the catchphrases and all the fashion and all that. I wasn't protecting her from Cheetah Girls. I was just making it less available, but it was still out there. So the world does get in, but you have a great deal more control if they're home with you all day and you're in your homeschool group. You kind of know people really well, and people share the same values and the same morals and the same concern for their children's innocence. So there's a lot more control. The other thing people get very concerned about is that kids aren't going to have a prom. I know, it's ridiculous. Homeschoolers have proms. You see pictures on Facebook all the time of homeschool proms. Our homeschool group started doing it, I want to say it's like 14 or 15 years ago. My kids have always been on the committee, so we've always been involved. They do it themselves. They call it a MORP, which is prom spelled backwards, because it's the opposite of regular proms. That's why they named it that way, which is cute. But they did a really great job of doing it. It's a very wholesome event. It's not the debauchery that you usually associate with proms. Even when I was a kid, proms were not great. So this is just a very nice event. And they do it. And tons of, if homeschoolers want to get something done, like a prom or a field trip or something like that, they just go ahead and do it. So they're very independent that way. And they're very creative and clever and all of those things because they've been taught to rely on themselves and they've been taught how to learn. So they learn how to do these things for themselves. And it's a really good thing. Another thing is they will know I've heard this quite a few times, and it's astonishing. They won't be able to live really well after graduation. They won't be able to go to college and get along with people. They won't be able to function in the real world. My kids went to college. They're fine. They made friends. They did things. I have, older children now who are out in the working world and doing really, really well, getting promoted, making friends, making good connections. It's just silly. It's just a nonsense thing. Don't let anybody tell you homeschoolers, they graduate from homeschool and they live in your basement. Actually, it's people who just seem to be addicted to video games that live in your basement till they're 30. Nobody wants that, right? So that's the kind of socialization that schools provide is kind of a false socialization. And what we provide is a more authentic one. And the reason why you want this is the reason why you want to homeschool your children. The socialization reason is that most Catholic homeschoolers, all Catholic homeschool moms, are socializing their children by the 10 Commandments and the Beatitudes and the corporal works of mercy. To quote Mother Teresa, they are socializing their children to see the face of Christ in everyone. And those are the kinds of kids who are going to grow up and change the world. They really, really are. Now, I know some of you might know my story. The reason why I started to homeschool was my young son, Ryan, my oldest son. He was young at the time. Ryan was autistic. I don't know what the catchphrase is now for autism, but that's what we called him back then. They've changed the kind of how you speak about it. But he was diagnosed with autism. He was pretty high functioning, but he didn't speak until he was 4, just about 4. And he was just odd, he had severe learning disabilities. So his intelligence, his IQ was kind of on the low side. But he was just quirky and he flapped and he repeated things and he was just a little strange. So we pulled him out when he was going into 4th grade. He had done 3rd grade. And there were a lot of things about the public school that were wonderful. They taught him a lot of things. But he was picking up on other children in his classes' abnormalities. He was being exposed to things that we did not care for. One of the children in his class, the poor parents, he was a difficult child, but they would just let him stay up all night and watch inappropriate TV, which he would come in and quote the next day. And it was, so my son would come home repeating these words because he had no idea what they meant. And everybody laughed when he said them. So, in school, we were not laughing. We didn't think it was funny at all. So anyway, I was really concerned about those kinds of things. And then I went to a SEPTA meeting, which is special ed PTA in our area. And there are 5 grammar schools and a middle school, and the SEPTA encompasses all of that. So it's not like a PTA for one school. It encompassed all of that. So I went to a meeting, and there was a woman who's really, in tears. She was literally crying because her middle school child, who had similar problems to my Ryan, was being bullied and physically abused. And the principal said, I wish I could do something. I know, but the parents aren't responsive and I can't expel them because I guess you can't expel bullies. I don't know. So I came home and I said to my husband, he is not going to that school ever because I will go to jail. I will literally go to jail because I will beat somebody up if they touch my kid. So my husband said, oh, all right. And I said, I think we should homeschool. And he said, what are you, crazy? How are you going to teach math and science? But because I am terrible at both those things, but we've managed. So I went to a homeschool group. My friend who homeschooled said, come with me to the homeschool group. They were meeting at this beautiful Gold Coast mansion on Long Island that's open to the public. And it was supposed to be nature club, but really it was moms, drinking coffee and kids playing, which is great. And I met there my good friend Alice Gunther. She wrote a homeschooling book called Haystack Full of Needles, which is an excellent book. But at the time she hadn't written it. And she had a baby and I had a baby, and we were catching up. I had seen her. We went to college together, and I hadn't seen her in years. So we were catching up, and I was like, "Oh, you homeschool?" And she said, "Yeah, yeah." And she's telling me all about it. And I'm doing the mom eye scan, looking for my kids, and there I see my Ryan playing Red Rover. I think it was Red Rover with a bunch of boys, and I had never seen anybody play with Ryan before. He had never been included in a group thing, and I still can get choked up. I said, that's Ryan. He's playing with kids." And Alice looks and she goes, "Yeah, yeah, they've been playing that for hours." And I said, "He's playing." And she thought I was concerned for his safety. She's like, "Is it all right? I mean, he's fine." I said, "No, no, you don't understand." And I explained, and she said, "They just play with kids. There are lots of kids who aren't the same in this group. They just don't think about it. They're just kids." And I was stunned by this. And I went home and I said to my husband, "Yes, we are absolutely doing this." And so we decided to do it for a year and see how that worked out. And Ryan had friends. Ryan made friends, um, real friends, not people who were being pushed into it. So he got invited to parties, and when we went places, there were buddies to hang out with, and if he was acting quirky or strange, they would say to him, "Hey, Ryan, stop that," and he would. Like they made him want to be more like them, and so they kind of diminished some of his odd behaviors because he just wanted to be like his friends, like all people, all little boys and girls want to be like their friends. It was the most incredible gift that those kids gave to my son and my husband and I and all of us, our whole family. So 8 years later, in August of 2009, Ryan passed away. He was 14, and he had 8 years of friendship and love and acceptance. And I am so grateful that we decided to do this crazy thing called homeschooling so that Ryan had those 8 years. And when he died, it was sudden and tragic. He had a concelebrated mass with 12 priests and a bishop because he had wanted to be a priest. And so the bishop came because he said every priest should have a bishop at his funeral. He had heard about it. He had, I want to say, like 15 altar servers on the altar. All of his friends insisted on being included. He was in the squires for the Knights of Columbus, and because having friends gave him the confidence to join things locally. And so he had the squires asked me if they could be his pallbearers, and they were. And then he was in the choir. He was musically gifted. He had that kind of autism thing where they have one incredible talent, and he did. He was incredibly musically gifted, and he was in the choir at church. And every music ministry in the middle of the day came and participated in his funeral, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. So I'm not telling you this to tell you you should homeschool in case your children have a tragedy. No, I'm telling you this to show you that those children who were homeschooled and socialized properly gave my Ryan such a gift that it convicted me that homeschooling, that socializing is why you homeschool, because these are the children that are going to go out and change this world. They are living the gospel. When you teach them the catechism and right from wrong and the Beatitudes and the gospel and the Bible stories, and you emulate this because you're taking them to mass and you're making sure they get their sacraments, and you're teaching them to behave kindly to each other and to people around them, and you're with them all the time, so you're constantly modeling this behavior. That's socialization. Those are the kids who are going to go out there. They're going to go to college, they're going to go to law school, they're going to go to medical school, they're going to change the world. And even if they're landscapers and car mechanics and dry cleaners, they're going to change the world. So If you take nothing else from this whole week of wonderful, wonderful speakers and great talks and such encouragement and inspiration, please take away the fact that when you homeschool your children, you are socializing them, not only to change the world, but to get to heaven and to pray for you and to just be the kind of people that God intended them to be. So socialization is the reason to homeschool your children. Thank you so much again for inviting me. It's been wonderful. I hope you have a great Catholic homeschool week.